Okay, this is Morbid Zoo, a feminist YouTuber, and she's going to do an ardent, unironic defense of Edward Cullen of Twilight. Uh, she's not going to let go of her feminism, so she's going to blow at it. Let's start at this.
So Midnight Sun came out this year, which means the world is now populated with another several hundred pages of piercing gazes and sparkles and centenarians watching teenagers sleep. The same stuff that's...
There you go. Already centenarians. In other words, she's going to trash. This guy is supposedly 100 years old, so it's supposed to be creepy, right? This old man is taking advantage of this young girl. You know something? If some guy said, "Oh, I'm really turned on by Claudia from Interview with a Vampire," but that's all right because she's not a kid. She's actually 50 years old. Would this woman uh, would she say, "Yeah, that makes sense"? No. So of course, same with this. This doesn't make sense. Cullen is a young guy. He doesn't age because he's a vampire. So he's not old. He's the same age.
started gracing pop culture 15 years ago, and after 4 books, 1 spin-off, 5 movies, 3 fan fictions, 3...
Yeah, the girls love this. They love the creepy, supposedly creepy, sexy guy obsessing over them.
movies of the fan fiction, 2 shifted perspective versions of the fan fiction, 1 gender-bent version of the original is still reliably delivering wheelbarrows of cash to all associated parties.
Yeah, because female psychology is universal. And this is the stuff the girls like. This is basically a romance novel put into movie form. I have no problem with this. My issue is that you're going to try and defend this while trashing it.
This time we get to start all over from the beginning, with the entire tale told through the perspective of this fellow, whose inner thoughts I'm sure you're dying to know. If you grew up during the initial Twilight craze like I did, you know that there wasn't a whole lot of room for indifference. You either loved it or you hated it. And I hated it, because I was a baby cynic when Twilight came out, and it's fun to hate things.
Well, it was schlock. What can I say? But it was schlock that you girls love.
You know the arguments. It's a creepy and possessive relationship.
Since girls flock to this, and women too, they love creepy and obsessive. So you either like it creepy or it isn't creepy. So which one is it? But either way, it's going to be something that you don't like.
And vampire baseball is dumb, and you better hold on tight, spider monkey.
You better hold on tight, spider monkey.
And of course, it's all engineered by the Mormon conservative big bad. And I know other people have done the whole Twilight revisiting thing, judging it more charitably, like, yeah, it's ridiculous, but let people like what they like, you know? Twilight isn't a secret masterpiece or anything.
Actually, I think it was a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece at giving the girls and ladies exactly what they wanted. Just like harem anime is attractive to guys. You know how harem anime, the average guy protagonist has all these gorgeous girls throwing themselves at him? Well, this is what Twilight is for girls. These super uber wrench, all go, not just being interested in her, but revolving their whole lives around her.
Still better than Twilight, but its existence isn't going to ruin the forward march of civilization. So, like, it's fine, you know.
Forward march? What do you mean by that? I got news for you. If you're talking about female psychology, it is set. It hasn't changed one iota since the Stone Age. And that's why you girls still love this schlock. There is not going to be any progression. This is where we are.
Like, don't yuck people's yum. I thought it might be fun to do my own deep dive into Twilight and be the 50th person on the YouTube to talk about sexy vampires. So
I doubt your dive is going to be very deep.
So I watched all of the Twilight movies for the first time in about 12 years, and I don't think they're bad anymore. I actually think maybe, possibly, they might be kind of good.
Of course you think it's good, because it appeals to females' sexuality. It appeals to female psychology, even though it's schlock.
Fun. I found its themes to be of interest.
Yeah, I suspect you do. The themes are these really gorgeous, wealthy, powerful, dangerous men, all, giving their lives, laying their lives down to protect this, in case of Kristen Stewart, mouth breather, this off the rack mouth breather.
And now I'm a little bit mad about it. I feel like American society duped me into thinking that this series that was truly ever present for a couple years wasn't worth anything but my ridicule. Mostly, I'm mad on behalf of one character, the one I think was done.
I notice you girls always blame society or something else, as if they brainwashed you. It was popular to dump on it at one time, and you joined the popular move, and now you are reverting to type. You're enjoying it too much. It appeals to you too much, to the psychology of the woman, and you're going to give into it.
Dirtiest by this whole cultural shit show. So all of this is to say that the reason we have a camera in front of my face today is because I want you to be able to look me in the eye while I sit here and ardently, unironically defend Edward Cullen.
You're doing a terrible job, and you're going to continue doing a terrible job. Now we'll skip most of the junk, and we'll go to the problematic part, right? Here we go.
The Twilight series does far more than urge abstinence. It conveys damaging ideas to...
Okay, this is what she's going to be defending against.
Vulnerable young people. Some of the alarming right-wing religious messages the series gives young people are that men save women and give them immortality through forcing obedience. Sexual arousal in teenage girls who are not in love with their future mates is unnatural. Intergenerational marriages between teen girls and mature men are best. Men are naturally sexually violent towards women. Women enjoy being violently sexually dominated by the men they love within the sanctity of marriage. True fulfillment for women can come only through maternity, within marriage. And childbirth is the only area where women know best. For this reason, the series argues that abortion to save the mother's life is wrong, and only an evil woman would consider it. In addition, the series presents arranged marriage during the girl's early childhood as a romantic ideal. If all of this is not disturbing enough, the film adaptation of the first novel in the series, Twilight...
All right, this is nonsense. Let's get past it. Let's see what she has to say about it.
First, the author does a great job of consolidating most of the toxicities people accuse Edward of embodying, which is good for the efficiency of my video script. Second, it's just a chef's kiss example of the kind of superficial and inconsistent analysis I see applied to Twilight.
It's not superficial. It's a feminist take, and that's a hate movement against men. So, of course, these good women, by the way, whoever wrote that, she probably enjoys Twilight, because they just write bullshit to demonize the male character while still wanting that male character. She would cream her pants if Edward Cullen was skulking around, stalking her.
Twilight all the time. When this author talks about racism at the end there, she's referring to an argument she makes in this paper about Jacob Black's portrayal in the first movie, which is that because he lives on the reservation and Bella goes to public school, the movie is signaling to the audience that Jacob is not an available partner to her, and that Twilight, for that...
But first of all, this has nothing to do with racism. This is about class. Jacob is the poor guy on the other side of the tracks, where the girls might slum with and have like a one-night stand with. And Edward Cullen represents the white collar, you wealthy guy who the girls are always going to choose for a long-term relationship. And this movie appealed to girls and women universally because that's what girls and women universally like. That the movie gave them exactly what they wanted. So Jacob wasn't on the menu other than maybe a 1-9 bang. But he had to be there to say that this girl isn't just in love with one guy. All the guys want her. That's what his real purpose was for. But make no mistake, this has nothing to do with race. Jacob could have been white and it would still come out that way.
Reason is white supremacist.
Everyone gravitates naturally towards those in their own racial group, so that attraction between Jacob and Bella proves impossible. Here they're just...
No, because Jacob is poor and Bella doesn't want to live in a cabin in the woods. She wants to live with Edward, who lives in a posh house.
buddies.
The ability of this author to make that claim when Jacob is a whole third of the big Twilight love triangle.
Yeah, but he doesn't need to be an actual candidate. He just has to be there to show that she's wanted by more than one Ubermensch. And of course she's going to say that. This is a feminist.
Most shots of him look like this, when almost all of New Moon is devoted primarily to sexualizing Jacob, is bananas to me. And just so we're clear, the issue here is not whether Twilight does or does not employ racist stereotypes. It does. The issue is that this author is choosing to decontextualize one part of Twilight from the whole in order to make an argument that isn't supported by the rest of the text. The author of this paper is reading Twilight through a feminist critical lens, which is where you analyze a text primarily through its portrayal of sex and gender to draw conclusions about how society...
Through man-hate. That's what it is. This author would love to be Bella. But she's got to demonize the guys because some way or other.
In general treats sex and gender. Most feminist criticism has to do with how women, both in and outside the text, manage the experience of living in a historically patriarchal society.
Society has never been patriarchal. Ever. Anywhere. Never. Men have fought and died in wars while their women sat home in safety. That's a matriarchy, not a patriarchy. You're welcome.
And it does seem like that would be the intuitive way to approach Twilight. It's a lady book. Look at it through the lady lens. The way Bella and Edward's relationship progresses, it is said, is reflective of the way conservative ideologists think the world should be, and as such reinforces misogynistic standards for how women should behave. Edward's...
You loved this series, so it's misogynistic. That means women love misogyny. If it's either that or it's not misogynistic. So take your pick. Which one are you? Are you willing to admit this has nothing to do with misogyny? Or that you, Morbid Zoo, love misogynistic things? Which one is it?
Age encourages teen girls to romanticize much older men, submit to their authority, and speak up.
No. Girls do go for older guys because they usually have more status. You go to any high school, usually the girls are dating a guy 1 or 2 years older now. And even so, and the girls don't submit to men's authority. If they married the guy and they tell him what to do. It's the other way around.
And speak up only when dealing with the only process women should have a say in, protecting the unborn.
Women obviously don't want much to do with anything. I mean, women become housewives even now because They don't. What interests you is not worrying about things. You attach yourself to a man, then you put all the burdens on him. All the decision making's on him, all the responsibility on him. That way he has to deal with it all. That's not submitting to authority. That's being lazy and cowardly and using. You're using another person.
It tells girls that men are going to physically abuse them and that that's something they're just going to have to put up with because
girls like rough sex. What can I say? That's why they found Cullen being quote unquote dangerous so sexy.
Girls are incapable of taking care of themselves within human society. But there is a problem.
Not incapable. They prefer not to have to. That's why they become housewives still. The guy looks after them. They have no responsibilities.
With this analysis, Twilight doesn't really accommodate the basic patriarchy bad feminist perspective people tend to apply to it, because Twilight doesn't really take place within human society.
This is an excuse. It's the same story as all the other romance novels. It's that you're now trying to say, because he's a vampire, the novel stories that you love, this one you don't have to crap on because he's a vampire.
If anything, it's an escape from human society. The playing field is level among vampires. Everyone is equally physically capable, apparently equally rich, and has equal access to the same resources at the same time as they're equally denied access to others. If they don't all have the same resources, all they have to do is collect interest for a couple hundred years. That's how Carlyle made his Forbes fictional 15 worthy riches. Male and female vampires are apparently as sexually egalitarian as any society is likely to be. They can't even discriminate based on reproductive ability.
Then, by rights, he shouldn't be chasing after Bella. I mean, if these people, they're undead, right? So they're not going to reproduce. So all the psychology should be dead too. There shouldn't be like a husband and wife, anything amongst the vampires. Should there? It should be much more like Interview with the Vampire. That was much more like that. So why is this vampire, this undead guy who's out of the reproduction business, why is he chasing after a Miss Do-Nothing like Bella?
The reason that matters here is because if the patriarchy isn't subjugating women, it's no longer a patriarchy.
Well, there you go. You're finally getting it. There's never been a patriarchy. Feminism is a hate movement, and it's like the KKK, and people enable it. And that's why it's still being spouted.
So to imply that Bella marrying into a vampire family carries the same anti-feminist implications as it would if Edward weren't a vampire is...
It wouldn't be anti-feminist anyway, because feminists give women what they want. And that's why, in the end, there's really no feminist attack on Twilight. For all this, that stupid little article you showed earlier, they weren't, Twilight wasn't destroyed like Star Wars or some of these other ones. It was hands off because women actually love it. You love this series. And so that's why you never see any real damage done to it.
It's disingenuous. And this has nothing to do with the merits of feminist criticism, just so we're clear. The type of criticism isn't what matters here. What matters is whether whatever argument you're trying to make is supported by the text. There are plenty of feminist arguments you could make about Twilight that make a lot more sense.
There you go. You aren't letting go of it. And so that's why your defense blows. If you really want to defend Twilight, you would say Twilight is great and the feminists are full of shit. I love this. I love Twilight. I, Morbid Zoo, love Twilight. And I would love to be Bella and have all these super hot, wealthy Ubermensch chasing after me. That's how you defend it. You don't make excuses like they're vampires.
To me, at least, why is Bella so preoccupied with being physically older than Edward?
Because she knows that if she goes older, he can step on to another one. I mean, he's immortal, basically. So if she gets old and ugly, he doesn't have to put up with her. Which makes sense that he has to make her a vampire by the end of it. Because why would you get married to someone where you say, wow, I'm not going to want to deal with this person in 30 years?
What possibilities are denied her as a human girl that are available to her as a vampire? And it's weird because
she doesn't go old and ugly. That's the main thing.
there are lots of other shows and movies that have similar themes and plot points and nowhere near the critical backlash Twilight got. We accept Beauty and the Beast stories just fine despite their troubling but ultimately...
There's nothing trouble about Beauty and the Beast. Look, Beauty and the Beast is standard fare. The Beast, do you ever notice he lives in a castle? He's another wealthy guy. Right? So there's all kinds of real life women who marry hideous old men for their money. And that's all that's going on here in Beauty and the Beast.
A literal monster who's been locked away from society needs to change is the love of a good woman. You don't see any academic...
Of course. And know why that's popular? Because the woman doesn't have to do anything. She doesn't have to climb any mountains, change personally. She's born good, and she just has to, she's like the magical girl. She shows up and his love for her transforms him. She never gets transformed because she's perfect already. Girls love that shit. You love it.
Articles explaining that this might give children the problematic idea that their dishes have feelings. And that just tells me that there's got to be another element.
By the way, girls love the idea of marrying a guy who has a bunch of servants. Right? So she doesn't have to lift a finger. So of course they don't give a shit about the servants.
At play here. Some extra textual factor that affects how people are reading Twilight. Like almost...
Are you going to blame this woman for being a Mormon?
As though people are trying to counterbalance some kind of perceived political siege.
Okay, you are.
Stephenie Meyer is a housewife of the Jesus Christ of Latter.
Called it. She's a housewife. She's a housewife. And she wrote a bunch of books, and that she was honest. She was honest about what she wanted out of life and what turned her on. And all the women and girls flocked to read these books. And so they made movies out of it. Then they flocked to watch these movies. Let me tell you something. There is no conservative or liberal women, Morbid Zoo. A woman is whatever is convenient for her. If some uber rich liberal guy showed up, she might leave her husband for him. And then she's no longer conservative. She's a liberal. But either way, she's living off a man.
Latter-day Saints denomination. It's safe to assume that she's politically conservative, and it's hard to imagine the criticisms about Twilight holding the same kind of weight without those facts.
See, this is what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter at all. She wrote a story that you love. You and she agree where it really counts. Both of you want like a harem of ubermenches chasing after you. You, the off-the-rack girl.
It's not just the idea of intergenerational relationships critics are having a problem with here. It's a certain kind of intergenerational relationship. Say, a certain Warren Jeffs kind of relationship. Warren Jeffs,
Get by this bullshit. Yeah, he's an older man, younger woman. And girls go for that because they want to be taken care of.
Old men have over young girls that they're taking advantage of when they pursue them. The stereotype.
Men aren't taking advantage of young girls. The young girls are taking advantage of the men. These men build up a lifetime of equity, and these young girls who haven't done anything partner up with them, live off them, leech off them, and then when they get tired of them, they divorce them and they can get alimony. So the man continues to pay for past association. These young girls are parasites and predatory to these old guys with money. They're the ones with the power. The legal system is set up for these girls to take advantage of these old guys.
Typical kinds of I'm going to marry your 12-year-old fundamentalist Mormon relationships these kinds of criticisms are alluding to sustain themselves through exploiting a position of authority with the goal of tying off all avenues of female agency until
you girls become housewives because you don't want to deal with agency. Or let's say more importantly, responsibility or obligation. You're glad to have a man make all the decisions. That way you don't have to. And you don't suffer any blowback. If something goes wrong, you say, geez, I didn't make that decision. That was what my stupid husband did. He's a jackass. Go punish him.
They atrophy. The toxicity of predatory relationships between old men and young girls function on a patriarchally granted societal power, which Edward...
Yeah, you mean the girls are predatory to the guys, and the legal system allows it. That's what it is, and it's matriarchy. Thank you. You're welcome.
Doesn't have. Edward has been alive for 109 years, but within the rules of the Twilight universe, that isn't the same as being 109 years old.
See, this is a bullshit defense. I already said this. This is a young guy. As a vampire doesn't age. But it doesn't matter. If he was a young guy who was in a wealthy family and he drove up in a limousine, that's just as viable as being a guy who doesn't age and he builds up his money on his own and he buys the car on his own. Either way, they're driving up to this young girl with a limousine. And that's what you girls want.
Still 17. He just never stops being 17. Age isn't just about how long you've been on the planet. It's about what you've done on the planet while you've been alive. In his 109 years, Edward has never had a career. He's never been married. He's never had children. He's never been able to build up any kind of social capital or influence. His life...
So basically, he hasn't lived his life until he reaches this off-the-rack girl. And then he gives himself up to her, everything. Bella is beneath Edward. He's too good for her. He shouldn't, Edward by rights wouldn't touch her other than as a bang, if he was capable of it as a vampire. And since he's probably not, he wouldn't have anything to do with Bella for any reason. Bella is a boring mouth breather.
Doesn't have any of the features that make it creepy for old guys to be into teenagers. Like, think of how different...
You girls shack up with older men all the time. That has nothing to do with predatory men. You are the predators. You look at older men with money and you say, I'd rather be with an old man with money than a young man who's penniless. That's what you want. That's your decision, and you're not putting it on guys. Old men are not to blame.
Different the dynamic would be if it were Carlisle who was into Bella. But this is all just...
If Carlisle was into Bella, the girl would be okay with that too, because he's still a good-looking young man with money and power and prestige, and he'd be dangerous.
Such a stretch anyway, because Stephanie Meyer just isn't that kind of Mormon. And I just can't help but think that a lot of these criticisms are based on not wanting a...
None of these Mormon women are that kind of Mormon. Powers here, she made something that is universal, has a universal appeal to the female psyche. All women want it, other than maybe lesbians.
Mormon housewife to be successful, less out of malice than out of this fear that if Mormon housewives seem friendly or satisfied with their decisions in any way, it'll be good PR for conservatism. It's certainly not because of her out...
This has nothing to do with conservatism. You would marry a guy with money and leech off him, even if you're liberal. It has nothing to do with conservatism and liberalism.
Outspoken politics. If Stephanie Meyer has been using her massive platform, especially in the early 2000s, to push a radical conservative agenda, then she's pretty bad at it.
I don't really feel like we should be looking for our role models in fiction. Well, I never write messages. I always write things that entertain me.
Every indication I can see is that
There you go. She wrote something that entertained her, and because she's a woman, what she wrote entertains women, period.
Stephanie Meyer isn't interested in converting anyone to her personal opinions, which is much more than I can say for certain other celebrity authors. Her Mormonism and housewifiness is just another part of this series that's only scary if you don't look for evidence to support it, like the racism of not making Jacob Black sexually available enough. And this beginning with your conclusion thing results in a weird situation where the criticism isn't.
But Jacob was sexually available. He just wasn't available for a long-term relationship because he was penniless. And Edward Cullen wasn't.
Really criticism as much as it's just personal branding. In the cultural lexicon, your reaction to Twilight is still basically shorthand for what kind of person you are, especially if you're female. If you like it, then you're stupid and naive, and if you hate it, you're a good feminist, because only good feminists understand how truly damaging this series is. But
good feminists would all love to be Bella. Every one of them. They just aren't, so they don't like the male characters because they're male. Feminism is a hate movement. That's why it's written that way. They write these stuff. What can I say?
But taking that approach requires you to ignore the fact that there are clear textual explanations for why things happen the way they do in Twilight.
It happened because this is what the girls want. This is a female fantasy. There's nothing to explain. These girls, these young, average, off-the-rack girls, see themselves in Bella, and Bella is someone who hasn't achieved anything in her life. She's not special in any way, and this Superman wants to wrap his entire life around her. He's lived over 100 years, and yet he's what? Overly interested in this boring teenager? Of course.
Is initially rude and gaslighty toward Bella because he's a vampire and it's in everybody's best interest that she not know that.
No, he's doing it because this is the way romance novels go. There's a romance novel formula, and it's following that formula. And the reason it's a formula, I have to say this, Morbid Zoo, is because female psychology is fixed. This is what turns you girls on, and it's universal too. No, that's why you girls hate when someone generalizes. This isn't even a generalization. This is all women. I'm saying all of you. That's why girls and women went to these movies in droves, because this is what you want. They gave you exactly what you want.
That's a pretty good reason. And you don't have to be into it or care about the series to see that that's a perfectly valid way to introduce conflict into this plot. In light of the aesthetic of how vampires were portrayed in the 1800s, the imagery of Bella dying from her pregnancy is interesting. She literally looks like...
Oh, by the way, Bram Stoker that you showed there, the women of that era loved this novel. They got turned on by it, just like today's girls and women are turned on by Twilight.
were portrayed in the 1800s, the imagery of Bella dying from her pregnancy is interesting. She literally looks like some of the first melodramas ever made, when it was still really cool and romantic to die of tuberculosis. The difference is that in a normal melodrama, or even a normal vampire story, Bella would die and it would be a very sad, romantic illustration of the ultimate fragility of women.
No, not fragility. What it is saying that this woman was heroic. The child means something, right? This child is so special, I'm willing to give my life for it. That's why it moves people.
Instead, Bella dies and then comes back way cooler. Just look at her.
Yes. And this just goes to show that that is a bullshit. You know, this idea that women want to die for their children. Women abort their children all the time. What matters to the women are the women. They're number one. And that's why this is another reason why it appealed to young girls, Morbid Zoo. Because the young girls don't want to die for a baby. They want to have their baby and live. Live number one. And now they're back better than ever.
What a tragedy. Wings clipped by the patriarchy, potential squandered. Oh, will woman never be freed of the cold shackles of matrimony?
I have news for you too. No potential was ever squandered. Bella here, she's reached her potential. That's what she is. That's her potential. Bella is a useless mouth breather in this series. And she wasn't going to do anything. Exactly what potential did she have? What great things was she going to do? Morbid Zoo. The average woman does not sail the ocean's blue or climb Mount Everest. They do what goes on here. They dream about some guy who has built up equity, who has accomplished things over a lifetime, shacking up with them, and then they leech off them. That's what they want. There is no potential.
Abuse people generally point to in this series is Bella being hurt by...
This is important too, right? It's women like to, if they have no potential, say that, well, I actually do have potential, but society is holding me back. It's like for the guys, it's the Ayn Rand types. I'd be a billionaire, but these elites are holding me down. It's no one wants to admit that they just don't have the ability. In the case of Bella, she has no potential, and she represents the average girl who has no potential. But rather than just live with it and say, okay, I'm an off the rack girl, I'm never going to accomplish anything because I lack the desire for it, they're going to blame society. That's all the patriarchy is. It's the boogeyman. For the white nationalist, it would be the evil Jews, right?
Edward the first time they finally do the do, but god damn it, that has an explanation. Edward is too powerful, and compared to
The
him...
explanation is the girls love the guy getting rough with them. And like they love the danger, right? Because this is no different than any other romance novel. It's very formulaic. So all your defense is because you like this, you're going to use the vampire defense. But it's following all the rules of all the romances that there are no vampires. If they could take him and say he's not a vampire, and women and girls would still flock and watch this flick, I guarantee you that.
Bella is a fragile little bird whom a breath might wither, not because he is male and she is female, but because he is a vampire and she is not.
Because they want him to be that powerful. Women love their attack dogs. Girls love to know they hooked up with a guy who can beat up other guys. So if there's any trouble, they just sick this guy on them. So of course they like that.
He sees that sex is hurting her. His reaction isn't, look what you made me do, or, oh, I just couldn't control myself. It's, oh no, that can't happen again. I do not like this thing that I have done to you, however accidentally. I don't want to do any more of the do until you're vampirized so I don't hurt you again.
You should be angry with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all just lame excuses on your part.
Yes, it is silly. So silly. But that doesn't mean it doesn't make sense, and it certainly doesn't support the idea that Twilight is an allegory for marriage being an all-purpose solution.
Marriage, women love it because it ties the guy to them. So if things go tits up, he can't just walk away. And also, unlike this scene here, usually this guy is off to the side and she's centered. Girls have said in the past, they don't want to get married. They just want a wedding. They want to be the center of attention. And look how much money it would have cost to do this wedding. So it's also a show, a grandiose show of status. Look how much money I have to waste. And look how he's dressed. She's dressed like the nobility. He's dressed like a servant. This guy looks like he's a waiter or a butler. So, I mean, that's what weddings are about too. The man is showing his servitude to the upper crust.
That doesn't mean that there's nothing about this relationship that could be called problematic.
Hey, did you do this to my truck?
And it
There
does.
you go. You can't let it go. You love everything about this series. And you're trying to protect it, but shit on it. Sorry, this is a lame attempt. Why can't you just say you love this? You love everything about it, which you do. And so it isn't problematic.
Doesn't mean it's bad to foreground and discuss the problematicness that's there. It just means that if you've already decided something is bad as a whole,
Yeah, you're going to discuss it, then you're going to go and watch it or read it and love it.
It's a lot easier to both find reasons why and ignore reasons why not. And that is the definition of bad faith. Remember, kids, if you remove a character's actions from the context of those actions, that means you're no longer analyzing the text. But I'm not just here to tell you that these criticisms are in bad faith, oh no, because even though I don't think a critical feminist approach is the best one to use here, there is still society.
Critical feminist approach isn't best to use anywhere. It's the worst because it's a hate movement. And it shits on the stuff you love. You can't defend this movie and be a feminist. You can't love it and hate it. You love this shit. Like I say, feminists have not brigaded Twilight and ruined it like they did Star Wars or the Terminator or any of these other ones or Star Trek. Because these feminists are just like you. You're a feminist too. You're girls. You all have the same society, psychology. You love this. You want to defend this? Again, just say you love this and it's great. And all the girls should watch it and read it. That's what you do. That's how you defend it.
Symbolism to be found in Twilight. A dismissal of criticism isn't the same thing as a defense, and I promised you a defense. I promised to tell you why there are reasons to like Twilight, not just tolerate it. Edward Cullen.
Well, I told you why. You've got, what is it? This is over an hour long because you were prancing and dancing. You are just like every other girl. You love the same things. You want these Ubermenches to come and circle their lives around you. And that's why it's so popular. But I mean, to me, this shows you have a bit of a shame over your own psychology because it never gets admitted that you girls dream about your fantasy is that you don't have any potential, you have no special qualities, you accomplished nothing, and yet you're seen as not only worthy, but top notch. I mean, there's no reason to be embarrassed. It's a fantasy. That's what, for men, that's what harem anime is about. It's a fantasy. The guys don't have to achieve anything or be special in any way, and the girls just love him for himself. It's a great fantasy. So that's all you have to say. You could have stopped this video around here, way at the beginning, and just said that. Said, I, Morbid Zoo, love Twilight. What are you going to do about it? It's not misogynistic. It's stuff that girls love. If it was misogynistic, girls wouldn't love it. If anything, it's misandric. Because all these ubermenches are treated like garbage. That love triangle is held on forever. Hey, here's something, Morbid Zoo. How come one of these guys doesn't turn around like Jacob and say, this woman's leading me on? This woman is jerking me around. I've got more self-respect. I'm dumping her. I can tell her to go screw off. So there. Anyway, this is as far as I think I need to go with this. You are embarrassing yourself in this video. Goodbye.